Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Crimson Crossover podcast presented by the Field of 68 JJ Apparel. I'm your host, Christian Sykes, joined as always by Charles Branch. It's been a little over, not a little, almost 2 months since we recorded our last podcast. It is the end of May 5/29, and we recorded our last podcast or published our last podcast on the 9th of April. Um, and we just thought, with the news of Labaron Philon coming back, and we have a new assistant coach, as well as some schedule stuff, thought no time better than the present to record a podcast. So, Charles, how have you been the past almost 2 months?
Well, to quote Alabama Gump Hunter Johnson, we sure could be using this rain that we've gotten for the past several weeks here in Alabama. Been coaching some Little League baseball, and it's been so bad that we've had to play through the rain and trying to dodge puddles on the field and stuff like that. But glad that we got some time now to talk about basketball. Completely turning the page on last year. And there has been some more positive news. I think it got a little worrisome for fans, just as far as maybe inactivity with the roster and some things that maybe didn't go our way. But a big, big pickup, I guess you could call it, as far as LeBaron deciding to come back for another year, which is really exciting. It's something that's been talked about across the state of Alabama for several years. You know, the excitement of Aiden Holloway and LeBaron Philon being in the same backcourt, and now we get 2 years of that at Alabama. So very excited to see that here in the next couple months once we get into October and November. But good way, I think, to I guess the only I like to talk about I'm an older guy. This news cannot be breaking at 10:30 Central Time at night. I know like we're out of school, kids can be up and stuff like that, but I gotta go to bed. I got things to do. So maybe we can plan a little bit better for this news breaking at an earlier hour. I know I saw many a tweet where people were waking up to this news, but I know everybody's happy to be waking up to this news about LeBaron coming back and very excited for his return to Tuscaloosa.
Well, you talk about 10:30 Central. It was 11:30 my time. Um, but I find that the whole dynamic in which LP, came back to Alabama just so interesting, and I think it just shows you kind of the nature of where college basketball and college athletics is as a whole in this current NIL era, where you know you get done with the season, and a lot of the discussion is, oh well, LP, looks likely to come back. He's just going to go through the draft process and then come back, and then he declares, and then the news is, oh well, he's not coming back anymore. There's no chance he comes back. He's 100% staying in the draft. His draft declaration didn't mention any possibility of him returning. And then he goes through the process, and they say, oh well, he might come back because he's not grading out as well as he had hoped. And then you get to the combine, and it's, oh, and he puts out a statement. Jeff Borzillo reported it, that I'm 100% staying in the draft. There's no chance of me returning. The door is shut on that. I'm staying in the draft. And the coaching staff proceeded as if that was going to happen, and started recruiting some guys. There was mention of Desmond Claude getting on campus potentially last week, and then that kind of visit fell through. And then all of a sudden, it's draft declaration day, where this last chance to withdraw was yesterday, and Tahad Pettiford for Auburn withdraws. Otega Owe for Kentucky withdraws. Edu Thiero stays in the draft, but I think it's Kevin Knox for Arkansas, he withdraws. Miles Uzon for Houston withdraws. I forget the guy's first name, but Bird for San Diego State, he withdraws. Like, all of these withdrawals are happening, and Cedric Coward, who Alabama was recruiting, stays in the draft. Um, and you kind of think that you're done, and then all of a sudden, 30 minutes before the draft deadline, out of nowhere, yay, Alabama drops that LeBaron's back. Which, by the way, for me, being up last night, I had to triple check that it wasn't a fake fake account because I saw it and I was like, there's no way that this is like actually happening. And then it was actually yay Alabama. But um that's kind of in a nutshell how Alabama's offseason has been, where there's been a lot of twists and turns. This person's coming on campus, this person's not coming on campus. Alabama has this much money in NIL. Alabama doesn't have this much money. Oh, maybe we're getting this person. Oh no, we're getting this person. Maybe this person's going to come back. Oh, now they're not coming back. Like that's how it's been, and it's been even with LeBaron announcing that he's coming back, it's been probably one of the more frustrating um, off seasons, or more not maybe not frustrating is the right word, maybe confusing uh, off seasons that I can remember, at least under Nate Oates, as far as information coming out, having a good sense of where the roster is going to be, the direction, just things of that nature. And um, fortunately, I think we're pretty close to being done. Um, I think, I mean, Alabama only has one more roster spot. If they find someone, I think it's going to be hard. You're going to be hard pressed to find a guy for Alabama that, if the NIL numbers that I think that we have left, you're going to be hard pressed to find a guy that's going to be a significant contributor for the amount of money that we potentially have left, in my opinion. Um, what are your thoughts overall on the offseason and just everything as a whole?
Yeah, there were a lot of guys that I think entered the portal early that had connections to the program that we thought we'd really be in on. And for whatever reason, probably more so on the NIL front, it didn't work out that way, which honestly doesn't bother me a ton. I feel like last year we had the exercise of being fairly public what we knew certain guys were getting as far as NIL to come back to Alabama, whether it was through the draft or whether it was through just the transfer portal. I know we're not even to 24 hours into LeBaron announcing his return, but haven't heard anything as far as what he will be getting as far as NIL from Alabama. I think there's rumors out there, of course, of the guys that have transferred into Alabama and what their NIL numbers look like too. But you don't have a bunch of numbers like you've had with other guys that have gone to other schools. And I don't look at it negatively of any of those guys going to trying to maximize their value. That's what NIL is supposed to be. I know it shouldn't be pay for play, and there's definitely things that need to be cleaned up there. But I don't have an issue with guys going to get money. As an Alabama fan, what I really like is I think we have built a roster of guys that want to be at Alabama and aren't going to keep asking for more, more, more. Or at least, I mean, they're locked in now, so shouldn't be asking for more, more, more. But guys who want to be at Alabama, want to get better, want to coach for Nate Oates, and want to represent this university. I think it's a lot of guys too that have a lot to prove as far as their continued basketball careers. Um, so I'm probably more excited about the potential of this roster because there are a lot of unknowns. You got guys coming off injuries, you got guys coming from lower conferences, you got guys like Bethia and Bol Bowen who played in the ACC, but both of their coaches had basically given up on the year halfway through. So there's still a lot of uncertainty and unknown as far as what you may get from certain guys. But I actually think this roster is a little bit hungrier and maybe, having the expectations or not having the expectations of Final Four or bust for this team, but they can actually just go out and play basketball. And it's not all about NIL or what this guy got paid or is he living up to the number that he got. That is what really excites me right now about this Alabama team is I don't feel like I've heard a ton as far as it relates to NIL, what certain guys are projected to be making or commitments that have been made to them as we get to the basketball season.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. Like I mean, I've heard numbers, right? Charles, as you know, I have a spreadsheet
Yeah.
of estimates that I've made, um, just based off of standard, market value of kind of what I assume a player would be worth. And again, my my assumption is not most like it is not the right assumption, right? Like I don't look at what I have and say, hey, this is fact, right? But you talk about last year, right? And I can kind of talk a little bit about this because I feel pretty comfortable saying this. Alabama had about 3.7 to $4 million in NIL last year, and it would it was very public about what players got what on the Alabama basketball team. Mark Sears got between 700 and $800,000. Like that's been very public as far as what's been reported. Grant Nelson 650 to $700,000. Cliff Amori $800,000 or so. Like these are numbers that I think I've talked about in Discord space or Discord or on the Discord, talked about it in spaces, talked about it, in tweets, different things like that, maybe even on the podcast, right? And the conversation last year consistently between fans, Alabama fans, was is Cliff Amori living up to the $800,000 number that we're giving him? Is he worth that number? Is Grant Nelson worth the X amount of money that we're giving him? Is Mark Sears at times worth the money that we're giving him? And I think that's just such a slippery slope conversation to have because, uh, especially in basketball, it's impossible to determine a player's worth, but just based off box scores or statistics or um, things of that nature. Like Cliff Amori, I think was one of our best players on the team last year. He didn't have like this crazy statistical output that maybe people were expecting him to have, but like he affected shots defensively to where guys wouldn't go in the paint because they knew that they would get swatted if they got in the paint, which made a team adjust their entire offensive philosophy around whether or not Cliff Amori was in the game. That's not a statistical value that you can measure, right? On a team changing their game plan based off of who is in the game. Like Grant Nelson, when he was healthy last season, teams had to adjust how they played him defensively because he was so dynamic with getting to the rim and being able to at times shoot from the outside. Like the impact on the other team's game plan, I think adds value to their NIL that can't be necessarily measured, in my opinion. Um, and so I'm kind of happy that the numbers and the staff, have been a little bit quieter this offseason. Um, Maybe because it'll calm down a little bit of that discussion. Now, I think it's pretty safe to say that LP is probably going to be our highest paid player on the roster. Um, and so obviously that discussion is going to end up coming up on whether or not Labaron is worth whatever money that he's given. But I'm fairly confident in saying that all of the guys on the roster are within a range of a NIL amount that like there's not one guy making a lot more money than everybody else. Maybe LeBaron, but other than that, like it's pretty even across the board.
When I think about the construction of this roster, I look at it being very similar to the 2020-2021 team. So Coach Oach's second team, and not saying there's another, Herb Jones or John Petty or anything like that, but that team was anchored by Jordan Bruner when he was healthy. And Jordan Bruner really spread the floor and allowed us to play five guys on the perimeter, and everybody was a weapon from the outside. And over the past couple of years, with Charles Bediako and Nick Pringle and Cliff, while they're great rim protectors, they're not three-point shooters. Well, now you look at your two bigs being Aiden Sherrill, who I continue to be really high on, very excited about, his development, and Noah Williamson, who's coming from Bucknell, 7-footer, 250 pounds, but can shoot from the outside as well. I mean, with what we've done offensively with Coach Pannone, which I'm excited for him to go to Arkansas State. That is going to be a big loss. I know we'll get into our new coach in just a little bit. Um, but now teams really, you have to guard us at the perimeter at all five spots. And we haven't been able to really throw an offense like that with the size that you still want probably to play on the defensive side within the past 4 or 5 years. So I think this roster is really constructed to what Nate Oates wants on the offensive side. Getting somebody like Labaron back who prides himself on defense, that's a great, leader as far as trying to get other guys to step up their level on the defensive side too. And of course, there's a lot of guys on this roster that have potential on the defensive side. But again, I'm really excited of what has been built and what will continue to grow during the offseason because I do feel like it fits what Nate Oates, a lot of what Nate Oates wants in his basketball roster.
Hold on just a second. I'm trying to find uh where is this? I believe LeBaron, when he went through the combine like measurables, I think without shoes he was measured at like 6'2.5". So with shoes, he's probably about 6'3", 6'4", probably closer to 6'4". You look at Latrell Wrightsell, so my current projected starting lineup, which we can kind of talk about now, is LeBaron, Latrell, Bethea, Taylor Bobo, and then Aiden Sherrill. So if you look at that, LeBaron with shoes is probably going to be 6'4", 6'3", 6'4". Latrell Wrightsell's again 6'3", 6'4". Bethea I think is listed at 6'5", probably could push 6'6". Taylor Bowen I believe is 6'10". And then Aiden Sherrill, while listed at 6'11", I'm pretty sure he's 7 feet or 7'1", because he was bigger than Cliff, and Cliff was listed at 6'11". Compared to last year's roster, which you had Mark Sears, who was measured at 5'10.5" at the combine, LeBaron, who's 6'3", 6'3", 6'4". Then you had Chris Youngblood, again 6'3", 6'4". Then you had Grant Nelson, 6'10", and Cliff Amore, 6'11". So immediately you look at on paper, like the team's going to have more length, more size. And just going through that starting lineup compared to the lineup that we had last year, immediately you are improving across the board shooting. Cliff Amore doesn't shoot three. You put in Aiden Sherrill, who was right around 32% three-point shooter, who I think could probably be a little bit better this year. Taylor Bowen, I'm almost certain he shot 40% from three
41.4% from three.
on the same volume as Grant Nelson last year. Jaleel Bethea, I think he struggled a little bit in Miami's system. He was an elite shooter out of high school. I wouldn't be surprised to see him similar to how Aiden Holloway came in. I wouldn't be surprised to see him getting close to the 40% mark. Latrell Wrightsell, if he's the starting two, he was our best shooter last season. I think he was like 44, 45% from three.
Yep.
And then LeBaron, who wasn't good at times shooting from three. Just a statistic for you, in the last 14 games, and thanks to High Tide on Discord, he put this together. In his last 14 games for Alabama, Labaron Philon shot 38% from three. So it's not like he was an inefficient three-point shooter. I think at times he was. I think at times he was a little bit passive. He's going to need to be a little bit more aggressive, taking shots and getting to the rim relative to last year. But like immediately, the shooting on the team's going to improve when we had one of the best offenses in the country last year that couldn't shoot the ball. And then on top of that, you're adding length, which I think our defensive intensity is going to improve. Our ability to stay in front of people, both at the guard position and be a little bit more dynamic in the post in the front court position. I think in the front court positions, I think is going to be huge. I wouldn't be shocked to see this team improve relative to last year. I think that a lot of guys need to take a jump. I think there still are question marks on this team and on the roster. You're expecting the Jaleel Bethea to take a jump. You're expecting Taylor Bowen to take a jump. I think you're expecting Aiden Sherrill, definitely expecting Aiden Sherrill to take a jump. Aiden Holloway, I think you're expecting to take a jump as well. And then LeBaron being more effective scoring. I think he was pretty effective, but being more effective and being more of that lead guard role. All of those things have to come into play. And then obviously Houston Millette not be injured, Latrell Wrightsell not be injured. Like there's a lot of things that have to go right, but I do like the roster construction. Um, and I think that the team's going to be pretty good. I think my only concern, truthfully, is rebounding on this team.
Yeah, I was looking at that. First, I want to say, big fan of Henry Barrera, our strength and conditioning coach. Hoping that, LeBaron is basically just in his office in the gym every day. He could use some additional size, some additional muscle, and just thinking about how we can spread the floor, with LeBaron's quickness and his ability to hang in the air. And I still consider him a good finisher at the rim. Excited about the potential there of how he can drive the basketball, hopefully generate some fouls, shoot a good percentage from the free throw line. I was looking at Noah Williamson's stats too earlier, and I know it's the Patriot League and he's a 7-footer, so he probably towers over a lot of those guys, but he was a guy who averaged 7.5 free throw attempts a game. You want him to improve on that 60% from the free throw line, but that's still, a huge part of our offense is guys being able to attack the rim, draw fouls, and get to the free throw line. I agree with you. Rebounding is going to be key, and it's always key. You got guys like Noah and Bol Bowen and Aiden Sherrill. We'll see what somebody like London Jemison can give you as a true freshman. He's coming in 6'8", 200, should probably be able to put some weight on as well. But I thought one of the things we struggled with as far as rebounding last year is I don't feel like our guards really rebounded the ball well. 2 years ago, Aaron Estrada and Latrell Wrightsell and guys like that would go in and get defensive rebounds. And we need guys like LeBaron, Latrell, Bethea, with how quick we still should be to go get some defensive rebounds and then get out and run the floor. Latrell, I know he only played 8 games last year. When he got hurt, he was averaging, just under 2 rebounds a game. But the previous year, he'd been averaging almost 4 rebounds a game. And those will add up. If that's a deflection that goes into, I'm thinking about the LSU game last year where we gave up a ton of offensive rebounds. And luckily it didn't hurt us as far as the win column. But Cliff was having to battle 3 or 4 guys down low, like a Corey Chest, who's now at Ole Miss, where if you got guards down there, it's going to get more guys off of your bigs to have more space to rebound, or they just get the rebound themselves. We get out, we run. So it's going to have to be a team effort. You can't just rely on guys like Cliff or Grant Nelson last year to eat up all those rebounds. Like I felt like we did too much last year.
Yeah, and I think some guys that like Keaton Bristow, like do I think he's going to have a big role this? And I don't know, right? Like they moved in last weekend. Practices I think start next week. Like who knows who comes out of practices like just killing it. Like Labaron Philon going in this time last year was not mentioned as a major piece for the team. Like it was expected like, oh, he's going to be our backup guard, is going to be behind Aiden Holloway. I think that's where we had him this time last year. And all of a sudden LeBaron's now starting the majority of the games and has a potential first round grade, at the end of the season. So us talking about the roster now and kind of our expectations, like clearly that's going to change. And if we were good enough to be able to project who's going to be good and who's not going to be good, well, we wouldn't be sitting here recording a podcast. We'd probably be coaching somewhere, right? But like Keaton Bristow is a guy that I think is an interesting development piece for Alabama, where like he's hyper athletic. He's going to be a true sophomore next year. He's a guy that kind of reminds me of like I don't want to this is going to sound really weird, almost kind of like Nick Pringle-esque in the sense of like he's going to jump out of the gym. He's going to, I think, do a lot of the hard-nosed, tough effort plays. Obviously not same body type. Like Bristow's a lot smaller. He can actually shoot from three. He was pretty effective in that last season. Um, but like maybe that type of raw potential where if Alabama can harness it and put it in the right way, like maybe he's a guy that's going to come in and give you quite a few rebounds, similar to how Mohamed Diabate did last season. Uh, you look at guys like London Jimison, who knows what he's going to look like coming in. I think he's going to be a really effective offensive player, but like, how do you know how a freshman's going to translate? Davion Hannah is a guy, a true freshman coming in who I'm keenly interested in because his offensive game, at least from what I saw watching, I watched a few of the like Jordan Brand game. I watched the high school playoffs that he was in. His offensive game is not good from what I saw, like whatsoever. But his defensive game might be some of the best on the team next season, truthfully. Like, I mean, there was one high school game I was watching. He had 4 blocks in the game. And it wasn't like, oh, I'm just blocking a guy shooting a three. Like a guy was driving to the rim and he jumped out of the gym and blocked a dude, like and snatch blocked him. Like his athletic ability, his defensive acumen and knowledge is really good. I'm interested to see what he looks like. Um, but overall, like I think for this team to be successful, you're really expecting a lot of Jaleel Bethia, former top 5 player, was expected to be a lottery pick last season. Obviously, his coach retired midway through the season, kind of left Miami in a bit of a disarray. Um, I think you're expecting him to take a jump. And then I think another key guy is Taylor Bolbowen, truthfully. And again, another guy that his coach kind of threw in the towel midseason. I know did Leonard Hamilton retire midseason?
Yes. I think he
Okay.
may have coached it out, but there were plenty of whispers going into the year that and the coaching search started way before the season was over.
Yeah. So,
Um,
I mean, that's another guy that like I think both of those guys have to take a jump for Alabama to be successful next season.
I am surprised you, as president of Noah Clowney Nation, didn't drop him in as one of those guys that kind of, I won't say Noah didn't come out of nowhere, but he was the fourth guy out of that 4-man class and became a starter, key contributor, and first round draft pick. So yeah, we don't know how all these guys are going to gel. We don't know who's going to make a huge jump, but there's obviously a potential for any of them to do it if they will, of course, put the work in and go do it.
And I think that's the big thing with Alabama and how they kind of run. And I mean, most colleges are going to be like this, or universities. If a guy comes in is just destroying practices, like obviously he's going to get playing time. But I think the preconceived notions of like, hey, this is what the starting lineup is going to be, and it's going to be set like that. I think a lot of there's some schools that'll do that. I think Kansas got caught in that last year, where they're like, hey, we're paying this guy this much money, he has to start, he has to play, and it kind of hurt them. Where like Nate Oates is like, come in, compete, you can be starting regardless if you're a freshman or if you're a super senior, like you can start right away if you're going to be the best. We're going to put the best player on the court, regardless of how much money they're making, regardless of anything like that. Like we're going to put the best 5 on the court at all times that give us the chance to win the game. And I think that that's something that the guys have to come in with. Um, Elsewhere, we can talk about Chris Fleming. Alabama hired Chris Fleming from the Portland Trail Blazers. He was an assistant coach. Notably, for Chris Fleming, he previously was the top assistant for the Chicago Bulls. That was under Billy Donovan, Brooklyn Nets assistant, Denver Nuggets assistant, and then again, notably, he was the German national team head coach for 3 years. I will say, during those 3 years, I'm pretty sure Germany was pretty bad in the world basketball, world. But still having a national team head coach on your assistant coach roster is quite the pickup for Alabama. I think the assumption for anyone listening or an Alabama fan is he's going to be taking the Ryan Pannone role, which Ryan Pannone was mainly focused along with Nate Oates on the offensive side of the ball with Brian Adams being the defensive kind of coordinator. I would assume that that would be where Chris Fleming would kind of move into is that Ryan Pannone role, mainly focusing on offense. Um, Charles, do you want to give your interesting statistic Chris Fleming?
Yeah, since 2019, 2020, when Nate Oates took over, Chris Fleming is the oldest coach on staff at Alabama at 55 years old, which I think us as Alabama fans have maybe sometimes questioned Nate Oates' game management. Um, I'm not going to get into the Tennessee game. I think that's a major anomaly. It's more about teams going on runs and timeout management and stuff like that. So now you have a guy who has been in the NBA. As you mentioned, he was the German national coach that I think will bring a lot of bench experience that we typically haven't had. I know Coach Murphy does a lot of the game management similar to Brian Hodgson as it relates to roster and matchups and things like that. I think Coach Fleming will be a valuable asset as it relates to game management of, you know, as fast as we like to play, is there a possession where we maybe should slow it down and take some time off? Is there, do we need to call a timeout, whether it's to stop a run or after we make a basket to set up the defense, which I know is something we've done at times and has been very successful when Coach Oates has done that. Look, there's a reason why Alabama's 31st NBA team, and we continue to build on that tradition as it relates to the style of play and the coaching. That going back to NIL, Labaron Philon could be a great case study for why NIL is good. And then you have all these guys who are, again, maximizing their value, which I don't have a problem with. But if the ultimate goal is to get to the NBA, why are you not coming to Alabama where you play an NBA style and you have so many assistants that have coached at a high level in the NBA, not just G League and summer ball and stuff like that, but actually being on the bench during the regular season can teach you not only the game of basketball, but probably answer a lot of questions as far as being in the league, getting to the league, and all that. I wish that's something that would come back to the recruitment process. It probably never will as it relates to, I really wanted to play in this conference. I really wanted to play for this coach. I really wanted to play in this atmosphere. Again, I don't have a problem with somebody maximizing their value. That's something though that is something that Coach Oates has built as far as being unique at Alabama, as far as the NBA type of experience or just the learning that you get as far as the NBA game. So I'm glad that we have somebody like Chris Fleming to take Coach Pannone's spot and continue that, at least being still somewhat attractive for any player that is trying to get to the league.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes into the conversation of a lot a lot of people talk about the Nate Oates discount. And sometimes the Nate Oates discount is to a fault of the University of Alabama. I'm not saying that they lowball people or anything, but um, for some of these guys, like you said, in order to even get a seat at the table for consideration, you have to offer X amount of money, and the value of coming to Alabama and being developed by an NBA coach or coaches, I think is sometimes, I mean, occasionally it's kind of overvalued a little bit. I think this year specifically, I think Alabama kind of got into a situation where, like, it's June, roster isn't finalized, you're sitting on a bunch of money because you're being specific or intentional with how you're spending it. Um, but I think at the same time, while it caused a frustration for fans, which ultimately it doesn't really matter whether or not the fans are frustrated as long as the people are on the roster, going into the next season, like it is what it is. But at the same time, like getting guys like you said that want to be at Alabama, that want that development, that want to be coached by Nate Oates, coached by now Chris Fleming, Brian Adams, Preston Murphy, like I think that that's more valuable than bringing in a guy spending $3 million to get a guy in here that, like, PJ Haggerty would be a great get for Alabama, right? Alabama's not going to go pay PJ Haggerty $2.5 million. That's just not going to happen. Because there's a lot of dynamics with like roster and guys thinking that, oh, I get paid $2 million, so I don't have to listen to a coach, right? Like that does happen in college, and I think that that's what Alabama's staff and Coach Oates is trying to mitigate, which is making sure that guys are playing for Alabama for the right reasons rather than, focusing and being more worried about themselves and their bank account than improving in development, which I think Alabama got into a little bit last year, um, with some of the guys where they were more focused on the me rather than the we.
Mhm.
I think last topic we have, there was a report from I forget who, On3 reported it, but I forget who was the NCAA person that said it, but that they're considering to increase the field from 72 to 76 as early as 2026. What are your thoughts on the potential increasing of the NCAA tournament field?
So, love college basketball, love watching college basketball games. I know there's a lot of talk about, if the system isn't broken, why fix it? Everybody loves March Madness as it is. I'm also one that whether it was 64 or 68, like I like how it is right now. Um, but I also, when it went to 68, some of these smaller schools, like the 16 seeds that are having to play against each other just to get into the tournament. For me, I still feel the tournament is the 64 teams and going to that regional site and a 16 playing a one, not a 16 playing another 16. I know there's the argument out there that for some of those 16-16 games, like that is their NCAA tournament. That's their opportunity to get a win. There's more exposure, there's more revenue potential through that. So there's some of that I don't fully know that I'll pass on and I get it. If you're going to expand it, I would rather it be 11 seeds trying to play in to the NCAA tournament. I like to see, 12. I like the automatic qualifiers to be your conference champions and all of them have a spot in the 64. And then your additional 8, 12, however many teams it is, I'd like for it to be for play-in spots, not that you've actually done the work and gone and won your conference tournament. Or if you want to do where it's 16 seeds playing each other, have a selection process for those number one seeds that got bounced in the smaller tournaments that got bounced in their tournament. And instead of giving, they used to get automatic qualifiers into the NIT. I know they don't do that anymore, but have those spots have some of those spots where those teams could play themselves into the NCAA tournament. And I know they use Dayton a lot. And I know part of it's the experience of getting to travel and the NCAA merchandise you get off of that as well. But can you imagine two small schools like use Lipscomb and Kennesaw State as an example, being here in the Southeast? If Lipscomb won the Atlantic Sun, I guess Kennesaw State's now in Conference USA. Let me think of a different example.
Georgia Southern,
Georgia Southern's in what
Sun
conference?
Belt.
They're in the Sun Belt now. Let's use Furman from the Southern Conference. Furman's from the Southern Conference, Lipscomb from the Atlantic Sun Conference. Whether they're going to Nashville or Greenville to the home site for one of those programs. That thing's going to be sold out not only with their students, but I imagine you got a lot of Furman people that would come to Nashville or Nashville people that would come to Greenville. Like that would be an electric atmosphere, in my opinion, which again, I know you have the conference championships for an opportunity to get into the NCAA tournament, but just that second chance for some of these small schools to get into the big dance, I think that'd be really good basketball. I think it'd be really good television. That's how I would do it. I know whatever way they're going to do it, they're going to try to maximize revenue. So I've grown to, there's so much conversation about it. It's going to expand, and I just have to accept it's going to expand. but I hope it doesn't just completely take away from what the NCAA tournament has been for so many years and so enjoyable for so many basketball fans.
I think what you should do is what you said, which is you take your last four buys, your last four in, first four out, next four out. That's 16 teams, right? You take those 16 teams, you put them in a play-in leading up to, maybe it's not 16, maybe it's eight, right? And four teams advance or two teams advance. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
and do it by based off region too. So
Yeah.
like you're not having people travel across the country to go play in Dayton. Maybe you have like a maybe the last four teams with the bye, right? Are the host sites, right? And then they host this tournament, this play-in tournament that's leading up to the NCAA tournament is what I would recommend. Like that's what I would do. It gets difficult because you have to then fit in like if it's an SEC team like a Texas A&M from 2 years ago that was one of the last teams out. Like they got all the way to the conference championship game, lost, and that game was on Sunday. And then they would have to go and figure out how to play a game on Tuesday or Tuesday, Wednesday, and then they would have to go and play a game on Friday. Like that's like how many games would that be? Like 6 to 8 games in a 2 week span. That like that might be pretty difficult to do. Um, or maybe you do again the 8 teams, there's 4 spots, there's just one game that they have to play, right? But I think it's kind of I agree. I think if you win your conference tournament, I think you should be guaranteed to be in the spot in the field of 64. I think a 16 seed that has to do a play-in game, I think it's kind of unfair for those teams because they did go and win their conference tournament. And I know that there's some smaller tournaments that like there's more tournaments than there are lower seed spots, right? Like that's why they do the play in because there's like 16 seeds or 16 seed quality teams that you have to fit into 4 spots, which is why they do it the way that they do. But um I do like the idea of maybe putting a little bit higher stakes on it because I mean, how often do you watch the Dayton games?
I mean, I don't really watch the 16 games a lot. And 2 years ago, when we were the 1 seed, one of those playing games, Southeast Missouri State, Texas A&M Corpus Christi, like that was one of the teams that we would have played. And I don't remember watching that game. I might keep up with the more, 11 versus 11 or 10 versus 10. It'd be curious to get the players' feedback. I know I think it was Alabama State Alabama State had the great moment of hitting the cross court pass to win their game, and then they'll go play Auburn in Rupp Arena for their first round game. So, I mean, I would think again, if you're a 16 seed and you would rather have the opportunity to play a 1 seed, even if you get beat by 40 or 50 points, like you're going to be playing a really good program instead of having to play another team to then get that opportunity. You've clearly earned the opportunity because you won your conference tournament, which is how everything's set up for you to be in. So put everybody in that's won their conference tournament and let the others battle it out to get into the main 64 field.
I agree. Uh, it's just kind of my thought, and I think you should like if you're gonna have in the college football playoff, if you're gonna have automatic qualifiers for conference tournaments, and I know that they do it for the NCAA tournament, but like I think with a field so large and the way that you're expanding it, the way that they want to, like there's no reason not to have every conference champion qualify or be eligible for the round of 64. Um, I also don't think that they should expand the field. I think that it should. I think that 68's more than enough. I think when you start expanding it maybe to 72 or 76, then you're going to have a 17 and 14 SEC team that's won 5 conference games going to be on the bubble. Like, are you really improving the quality of the field? I think the answer is no. Um, I think it's a money grab. And I mean, you see it in college football where they're probably going to expand to 16. Do you really think that every year there's 16 teams in college football that deserve a chance to win the national championship? Answer is no. And I think getting to 72 or 76 teams, like you're all you're doing is diminishing the quality of the field. And ultimately, like blowouts are going to happen more often. It's just not going to be fun viewing. I think that's what happened this year is the what was it like the top four seeds or something like that. There was like one or two upsets and you have all the ones make it to the final four and they're all blowing each other out. They're blowing other teams out. It's just like I want to improve the quality of the basketball, not make it lesser, which is what I think you're expanding the field is going to ultimately do.
Yeah, when you talk about the quality of the basketball, we've been able to ride these COVID waivers for the past several years. Those are now obviously going away. I know Sean Miller was talking about it, the new coach at Texas, that 25% of the portal has basically evaporated because you don't have these guys that have been in college basketball for so long that don't have a COVID waiver anymore. There's still a lot of cases, some litigation as some guys trying to get fifth and sixth and 7 years going on. But it is an interesting time with college basketball and for all college sports that these waivers that I think were a good idea. COVID was obviously crazy and a unique event that we're getting back to, hopefully getting back to what college athletics should be. And then when you've played your 4 or 5 years, if you do get a medical red shirt, that you either continue your career overseas in the NBA or you continue your career in something other than sports.
Yeah, and that is a good point to wrap up. We talk about the the roster a lot in this episode, and you talk about Alabama and just the state of college basketball in general. Like when you look at college basketball next year, I think when we talk about placing expectations on a team and specifically Alabama, because again, it's expectation season. We're going to continue to repeat this throughout the season about, limit your expectations. Don't expect Alabama to go to the Elite Eight. Like that's just not a smart thing to do if you're a fan, because you're going to be disappointed ultimately. I mean, not saying that Alabama can't get to the Elite Eight, but if they don't, then you're going to disappoint yourself for having loftier expectations. The quality of talent in college next year diminished so much because of what you said about the COVID waiver. And like you don't have 25, 26-year-olds playing college basketball anymore. Um, like I think next year is probably one of the more wide open years for college basketball. I think you're obviously going to have like the Houstons, the Floridas of the world, the St. John's, I think did really well. Duke, Louisville, like these teams that did a really good job of their roster construction, and I think are I wouldn't say head and shoulders above the field, but I think they got a pretty big lead or got a lead on the rest of college basketball. But like I don't think it's unrealistic that Alabama is probably like a top 25 team next season. And you look at the roster this year, I think compared to last year, where Alabama was ranked, I think, second in preseason polls, like people will objectively look at that and say, oh, Alabama's going to be significantly worse. Well, I think Alabama could surprise a lot of people and maybe be a top 10 team next season, but maybe not have the same quality of talent as last year. Um, just because I think in large part college basketball has lost a lot of talent. So just keep that in mind as we're going through the off season with practices and new information that comes out. That one, temper your expectations, and two, just because Alabama's team doesn't look as good on paper as last year doesn't mean that they will be better or worse than the last season. So
Yeah, last two things I'll say, because we'll get more into schedule later on. We
oh,
will
I
have
forgot about that
yeah,
completely.
well, we'll have plenty of games and opportunities to rise quickly in the rankings. Of course, the schedule isn't finalized yet because the NBA season isn't over. We got to figure out which Eastern Conference champion or Western Conference champion we're going to play. Um, So we'll get into that later on. But as we know, you got to have guards to win in March. And we got a really good experienced guard coming back. So very excited Labaron's back and hopefully continue this positive momentum as we get through the summer and get into basketball here in September and October.
Well, let me speak. Let's speak on the schedule real quick because that was
Right.
one of the topics that we didn't discuss.
Yeah.
Nate Oates last season said, "Hey, maybe we scheduled a little too hard. The guys are worn down," and then proceeded to schedule even tougher with road trips to Illinois, in the was it the Amway Center,
United Center.
United Center. Um, then you have St. John's at Madison Square Garden, which apparently is a neutral site game. Don't know how that, because they play their games in Madison Square Garden. I don't know how that's a neutral site game.
I
Um,
guess because we have a big alumni base in New York City, but shouldn't everybody have a big alumni base in New York City?
then you have Purdue at home. You have the Players Era Invitational. You have the ACC SEC Challenge. You have Arizona and Birmingham. Um, Other ones to that were announced was UTSA was announced, I think, yesterday, playing at home. You're playing, I think, at home versus South Florida, playing at home versus North Dakota. Um,
Yale.
Yale was your season opener. Like, where's the easy games? Like, I mean, obviously Yale, North Dakota, like, or Yale, North Dakota, UTSA, in theory, South Florida, which I think South Florida might be a little bit more difficult than what we think, just because Brian Hodgson is a good coach. Like, those are your winnable games. But like, other than that, like,
Our winnable games are against a team that has at least made the NCAA tournament 2 times in the past year and beat Auburn 2 years ago in Yale. North Dakota, who gave us a a dogfight up in the snow last year. And then you got UTSA in South Florida that are coached by former assistants that know the system. So you're right. Where's the easy breather to get into the year?
yeah, because you open up with North Dakota, and then you immediately have to go play, I think, St. John's,
Yes.
and then you're at St. John's, and then essentially at Illinois, I think, the next two games, and then you go immediately home to Purdue, and then you go from Purdue to the Players Era. I'm like, which, by the way, Players Era has Houston in it, has
Duke's in it.
Duke's in it, Auburn's in it, A&M's in it, like San Diego State's in it,
And as you mentioned, we still have the ACC Challenge.
and BYU's in it with AJ DeBansta, and they're like, I'm just like, just for once, can we just have like East, West, Middle Tennessee State of the deaf and blind as our first three games and then get into our difficult schedule? Like, I don't know. I don't know.
There's
I
no
have,
telling what our exhibition games will be, our charity exhibition
we're gonna
games.
go play the Celtics. Like, I mean, I've been told that, Nate's got a great relationship with Joe Mazzulla and the Celtics. Maybe, we go play the Celtics or their G League team. JD Davidson return game um for for us next season. I don't know. Just
I'd still love to see us match up against Blue Collar U from the TBT tournament. Bunch of Coach Oates' former players at Buffalo in an exhibition game at some point.
would be fun. I will say that I'm pretty sure next off season we're gonna have a foreign tour, because I think it's been 4 years
Yep.
since we had one. So I would be on the lookout for that. Just, I know this is like a year in advance, but like, I wouldn't be surprised if we went somewhere on a foreign tour next year. Um, Other than that, that's kind of been the Alabama news, or the college basketball news of the last 2 months. Um, we probably won't have very many podcasts this summer, if I'm going to be completely honest. Not a lot of stuff will change or information is going to come out. Maybe we fill the last roster spot. Um, I mean, the assistant coach is already hired. The majority of the team's already here. So I think our next probably podcast would be maybe August or September, maybe when we get some 2026 recruiting news and start doing schedule previews from there, as far as non-conference and SEC. Oh, the SEC schedule hasn't been announced yet, so we'll kind of maybe do a schedule podcast when it comes out. But Charles, did I miss anything? Do you have anything else?
Listen to the Weekly Joe. I think we got a couple more episodes of that over the next couple weeks. Guys do a great job covering Alabama baseball. I know we would have liked to have been hosting, but I'm excited to watch the team in Hattiesburg this week. And as I mentioned, I think they will have multiple episodes coming out over the next few weeks.
Is that your prediction, or is that a statement of fact?
I'll say it's a statement of fact.
That's let's hope so. They've done a really good job this season. They've had some really cool guests, and hopefully I'm still editing those and uploading them for you guys on Crimson Crossover. Be sure to check that out. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Other than that, I think we're pretty good to wrap it up. And we'll talk again soon. Roll Tide.
Old Tide.